I never thought my father would be the one to teach me that love makes you reckless. That it makes you stupid. That it turns brilliant men into fools who empty their bank accounts for strangers they've never touched. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Amara, and I'm 32 years old. I was born in Lagos but grew up bouncing between Nigeria and Belgium after my mother passed away when I was 7. My father, Benjamin Okafor, raised me and my younger sister Chioma on his own. He was a chemical engineer, the kind of man who solved problems for a living, who believed in logic and evidence and proof. He taught us to question everything, to never take anything at face value. So when I got that phone call from my sister 3 years ago, telling me that Dad had sent 12,000 euros to someone he met on Facebook, I thought she was joking. I was at work in Brussels, sitting in my tiny office at the non-profit where I coordinate programs for refugee women. My phone buzzed during a meeting, and I saw Chioma's name flash across the screen 7 times in a row. When someone calls you like that, you know something's wrong. I excused myself and called her back. Amara, you need to come home. Her voice was shaking. It's Dad. Something's happened. My heart dropped into my stomach. Is he hurt? Is he sick? No, it's not that. Just, please come. Tonight if you can. I drove the 2 hours to Antwerp where my father lived, breaking every speed limit on the E19. The whole way there, my mind cycled through possibilities. Cancer. Dementia. An accident at work. I prepared myself for bad news, but I couldn't have prepared myself for what I actually walked into. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived. The same kitchen table where he'd helped me with my chemistry homework, where we'd celebrated my university acceptance, where he'd held my hand after my first heartbreak and told me that any man who didn't see my worth wasn't worth my tears. But this man looked different. Smaller somehow. His shoulders were curved inward, his eyes red and swollen. Chioma sat across from him, a stack of bank statements spread between them. Dad? I said softly. What's going on? He looked up at me, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Shame. Deep, crushing shame. I've been a fool, Amara, he said. A stupid fool. That's when the story came spilling out. All of it. Every detail that made my stomach turn and my heart break simultaneously. 6 months earlier, my father had been active on Facebook, mostly in groups for Nigerian expats in Europe. He liked to stay connected to home, to share memories and recipes and laugh at inside jokes about jollof rice wars and Nigerian mothers. It was harmless. Sweet, even. Then one day, someone sent him a friend request. Her name was Jennifer Adeyemi. Her profile picture showed a beautiful woman, maybe in her early 40s, with flawless dark skin and eyes that seemed to smile even in a still photograph. Her profile said she was a nurse living in London, originally from Ibadan. A widow. Her husband had died in a car accident 3 years prior. She had one daughter studying medicine at university. Dad accepted the request. Why wouldn't he? She seemed legitimate, professional. They had mutual friends, though he didn't remember how he knew them. She started commenting on his posts, little things at first. A laughing emoji on a joke. A thoughtful response to an article he shared about renewable energy. Then she messaged him directly. I hope you don't mind me reaching out, she wrote. But I read your comment about losing your wife young, and it touched my heart. I lost my husband 3 years ago, and sometimes it feels like no one understands what it's like to carry on alone. My father, who had been alone for 25 years, who had poured all his love into raising me and Chioma, who had never even looked at another woman after my mother died, my father responded. They started talking every day. Just messages at first, then voice notes. Then video calls late at night after he got home from work. She would tell him about her shift at the hospital, about difficult patients and inspiring recoveries. He would tell her about his projects, about us, about the life he'd built in Belgium while keeping Nigeria in his heart. She understood me, Dad said, his voice cracking as he told us this. She knew what it was like to be caught between two worlds. To feel Nigerian but live European. To miss home but know you can never really go back. I wanted to interrupt, to tell him that's exactly what scammers do, they find your weak spots and press on them. But I bit my tongue and let him continue. After 2 months, Jennifer told him she loved him. She said she'd never expected to feel this way again, that God had brought them together for a reason. She talked about visiting him in Belgium, about maybe building a life together. She asked about me and Chioma, said she'd be honored to be a mother figure to us, even though we were grown. My father fell in love. Deeply, completely, in the way that only lonely people can fall. That's when the request started. First, it was small. Her daughter's university fees were due, and there was a problem with her bank account, some kind of freeze because of Brexit complications. Could he lend her €500? Just for a week until it was sorted out. She'd pay him back immediately. Dad sent the money. She thanked him profusely, called him her hero, her answered prayer. The bank freeze took longer to resolve than expected. 2 weeks later, she needed another €800. Her daughter was having panic attacks about being kicked out of her program. Dad sent it. Then there was a medical emergency. Jennifer's mother in Nigeria had a stroke. She needed to fly home immediately, but her credit cards weren't working for some reason. Could he help with the flight? Just €2,000. She'd pay him back as soon as she returned to London. Dad sent it. I was staring at him across the table, my hands clenched into fists. Dad, you didn't actually meet her, did you? You never saw her in person? He shook his head. Every time we planned to meet, something happened. She had to work extra shifts. Her daughter got sick. There were complications with her mother's health. But we talked every day, Amara. I saw her face. I heard her voice. She was real. Dad, Chioma said gently, tears streaming down her face. How much? How much did you send in total? The silence that followed was suffocating. €12,340. I felt like I'd been punched. €12,000. That was 6 months of his salary. That was money he'd been saving for retirement, for emergencies, for the future he'd worked so hard to build. When did you realize? I asked. Yesterday, he said. I asked her when I would finally meet her. I told her I wanted to book tickets to London, that I needed to see her in person. She got upset. Said I didn't trust her, that real love didn't need physical proof. We had our first argument. He took a shaky breath. So I did something I should have done months ago. I reverse image searched her profile picture. The woman in the photos was real. Her name was Dr. Jennifer Okonkwo, and she was indeed a nurse, but she lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and had no idea her pictures were being used to scam people across the world. Someone had stolen her identity, created multiple fake profiles, and was using her face to con lonely people out of their money. The person my father had been talking to for 6 months, the person he'd fallen in love with, the person he'd sent his life savings to, they didn't exist. I sat down heavily in the chair next to Chioma. My mind was racing. My father, my brilliant, careful father, had been catfished. Scammed. And not by some obvious fraud, but by someone who'd taken the time to build a relationship, to understand his vulnerabilities, to make him feel seen and valued for the first time in decades. Did you report it? I asked. To the bank, yes. They said there's nothing they can do. The money was sent willingly to accounts in Nigeria and Ghana. It's gone. And the police? I filed a report this morning. They said these cases are almost impossible to trace. The scammers use multiple accounts, fake names, VPNs. They said I should move on. Move on. As if 12,000 euros was nothing. As if my father's heart wasn't shattered. As if his dignity wasn't in pieces on this kitchen table. I looked at my father, this man who'd sacrificed everything for us, and I felt something ignite in my chest. Not just anger. Something sharper. Something that tasted like determination. No, I said. We're not moving on. We're getting your money back. And we're making sure this person never does this to anyone else. Chioma looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Amara, the police said. I don't care what the police said. Dad, do you still have access to the Facebook account? The messages? Everything? He nodded slowly. Good. Don't delete anything. Don't block them. In fact, I want you to keep talking to them. Amara. Dad, trust me. I work with women who've survived trafficking, domestic violence, every kind of manipulation you can imagine. I know how predators think. And I know how to catch them. That night, after Chioma went home and Dad went to bed, I sat in his study and created a plan. I took screenshots of every conversation, every bank transfer, every promise Jennifer had made. I noted the phone numbers she'd used, the email addresses, the names on the bank accounts. Then I did what I do best. I started building a network. Through my work at the nonprofit, I knew people. Journalists who covered online fraud. Activists who'd been tracking romance scams targeting the African diaspora. Tech-savvy volunteers who understood digital forensics. I reached out to all of them. But I also knew that catching a scammer required more than just evidence. It required something they didn't expect. It required us to scam them back. Over the next week, my father kept up the correspondence with Jennifer. She'd apologized for their argument, told him she loved him, that she couldn't wait for them to finally be together. She'd even sent him a song, a Nigerian love song that she said reminded her of him. Meanwhile, I was doing something else entirely. I'd found 3 other victims. Through online forums and Facebook groups where people shared warnings about scammers, I discovered that the same profile, the same face, had scammed at least 3 other men. One in Germany, one in Canada, one in the UK. Same story, slightly different details. All of them had lost thousands. I convinced them to work with me. 2 agreed immediately. The third, a Ghanaian man named Kwame living in Toronto, was hesitant until I told him we weren't just going after the money. We were going after justice. Together, we had evidence of fraud totaling over 40,000 euros. That's when I contacted someone I never thought I'd reach out to. Her name was Adi Yinka, though everyone called her Yinka. She ran a YouTube channel called Scam Anthem, where she exposed online fraudsters, particularly those targeting Africans and people of African descent. She had over 500,000 subscribers and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. Yinka was a black British woman in her late 30s, originally from Lagos but raised in London. She'd started her channel after her own mother had been scammed out of her pension by someone pretending to be a general in the Nigerian army who needed help moving gold bars. It sounds ridiculous, but grief and loneliness make people vulnerable. Yinka understood that. When I sent her the evidence we'd compiled, she called me within 3 hours. "This is good," she said, her London accent sharp and efficient. "This is very good. But if we're going to do this properly, we need to catch them in the act. We need them to admit what they're doing on camera. How do we do that? We give them what they want. A big score. But this time, we control every part of it. Here's what we did. My father messaged Jennifer and told her he'd come into a large sum of money. An inheritance from a relative in Nigeria, about 30,000 euros. He was planning to use some of it to finally fly to London to see her. Would she help him plan the trip? Jennifer's response came within minutes. She was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to see him. But then, coincidentally, she had news. Her daughter had been offered a place at Harvard Medical School, a special accelerated program, but she needed to pay the deposit immediately or they'd give the spot to someone else. It was 25,000 euros. She was devastated because she didn't have it. Perfect. Exactly what we expected. My father played along. He said he'd think about it, that he wanted to help, but he needed to be sure this was real. Could they video call with her daughter? Could he see some proof of the Harvard acceptance? Jennifer hesitated. Then she said yes. She'd arrange it. 3 days later, we had a video call scheduled. But this time, it wasn't just my father on the line. Yinka had set up a screen recording. I was in the room, hidden from view. And we'd contacted a cybersecurity expert who was tracing the IP address and any digital footprints in real time. The call connected. Jennifer appeared on screen, or at least the woman using that stolen identity appeared. She was in what looked like a modest apartment, lighting dim. The quality was poor, pixelated. "My love," she said, her voice warm. "I'm so happy to see you." My father, to his credit, stayed calm. "I'm happy too. Is your daughter there?" "Yes, she's coming. She's just nervous. You're going to be her stepfather, after all." A younger woman appeared on screen. Early 20s, pretty, shy smile. "Hello, sir," she said. "My mother has told me so much about you." My father asked her about Harvard, about the program, about her dreams. She answered smoothly, too smoothly. Every response felt rehearsed. Then my father said something we'd prepared. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. In fact, I want to help with the deposit. But I'll need to transfer it directly to Harvard's account. Can you give me those details?" Jennifer's face changed for just a second. A flash of something cold. Then the smile returned. "Of course, but there's a processing issue with international transfers to the university. It's easier if you send it to my account, and I'll transfer it to them. It's what they recommended." "I'm sure Harvard can accept an international wire transfer," my father said gently. "I'll contact them directly to get the information." The connection started glitching. Jennifer's voice cut in and out. "You don't trust me, after everything, can't believe." Then the call ended. Within seconds, my father received a message. "I can't believe you would doubt me like this. After all we've been through. I thought you loved me." My father typed back, "I do love you. I just want to make sure everything is legitimate. If you loved me, you wouldn't need proof. Send the money to my account, or don't send it at all. But know that if you don't, you're telling me you never really cared." Classic manipulation. Emotional blackmail. Making the victim feel guilty for being cautious. My father didn't respond. Instead, we waited. The cybersecurity expert called me an hour later. "Got them." The call originated from Lagos, from an internet cafe in Ikeja. "I've got the location, the IP address, everything. But here's the interesting part. The younger woman in the video? That wasn't live footage. That was a deepfake, a pre-recorded video that someone had edited to respond to his questions. Whoever's running this operation, they're sophisticated. This wasn't just one person. This was an organized operation. Yinka contacted me that night. "We need to expose this publicly. My audience needs to see this. But more importantly, we need to warn people before someone else gets hurt." "What about getting the money back?" "Amara, I'll be honest with you. The money's probably gone. Scattered across multiple accounts, converted to cryptocurrency, maybe even already spent. But what we can do is make sure everyone knows this person's face, their tactics, their methods. We can ruin their ability to scam anyone else." She paused. "And if we're lucky, if we make enough noise, maybe law enforcement in Nigeria will actually do something." I thought about my father, about the shame in his eyes. I thought about Kwame in Toronto, about the German man who'd lost his pension, about all the people who were too embarrassed to even report what had happened to them. "Let's do it," I said. Yinka's video went live 2 weeks later. It was titled, "The Face of Betrayal: How Romance Scammers Are Destroying Lives." It included interviews with my father, with the other victims, with the real Dr. Jennifer Okonkwo, who was horrified that her identity had been stolen. It showed the messages, the manipulative tactics, the way the scammer had built trust over months before striking. But the most powerful part was my father's testimony. He looked directly into the camera and said, "I'm a 62-year-old chemical engineer. I have 2 university degrees. I raised 2 daughters on my own. I consider myself intelligent, careful, logical. And I fell for this. Because loneliness makes you vulnerable in ways you can't understand until you've felt it. Because when someone tells you they see you, really see you, after decades of feeling invisible, you want to believe them. This isn't about being stupid. It's about being human." The video went viral. Within a week, it had over 3 million views. News outlets picked it up. The Guardian ran a story about romance scams targeting the African diaspora. BBC Africa did a feature. My father's face was everywhere, but this time, he wasn't ashamed. He was defiant. And then something unexpected happened. A woman named Blessing reached out to Yinka. She was a cybercrime investigator with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Nigeria, the EFCC. She'd seen the video. She had information. The operation that had scammed my father was part of a larger network. They called themselves the Lovebirds, and they'd been running romance scams across Europe and North America for years, targeting middle-aged and elderly Africans in the diaspora. They'd stolen hundreds of thousands of euros, maybe millions. But Blessing said something else that made my blood run cold. "They're not all men. The people running these operations, a lot of them are women. Young women who've been trafficked or coerced into this work. They're given scripts, told what to say, threatened if they don't meet quotas. It's a form of modern slavery." I felt sick. I'd spent years working with trafficking survivors, and here I was, face to face with another system of exploitation. "Can you catch them?" I asked when Yinka put me on the call with Blessing. "We're trying. But we need more evidence. We need someone on the inside." "What do you mean?" "I mean we need your father to keep talking to them. To gain their trust again. To get them to reveal more about how they operate." I looked at my father, who'd been listening to the entire conversation on speaker. He looked exhausted. Hurt. But also determined. "I'll do it," he said. So my father, at 62 years old, became an undercover operative in an international sting operation. It took 3 months. 3 months of my father pretending he still loved Jennifer, that he was sorry for doubting her, that he wanted to make things right. 3 months of carefully worded messages designed to extract information. 3 months of video calls where my father smiled and laughed while investigators recorded every word. Jennifer, or whoever was behind that profile, was cautious at first. But gradually, as my father sent small amounts of money again, 100 euros here, 200 there, the guard came down. They started talking about other clients, other lonely people they were talking to. They complained about difficult marks who asked too many questions. They bragged about their biggest scores. And one night, during a call, Jennifer got drunk. Or high. Or just reckless. She laughed and said, "You know, Benjamin, you're one of the good ones. Most of these people, they're so desperate, so pathetic. But you made it fun. You were smart. It was like a game. My father kept his face neutral. A game? Yeah. Seeing how far I could push. How much you'd believe. I told my team you were the biggest fool I'd ever met, and they didn't believe me until I showed them the transfer records. She was still laughing when my father ended the call. The recordings were sent to Blessing. Within 2 weeks, the EFCC raided 3 locations in Lagos. They arrested 11 people, including the woman who'd been playing Jennifer. Her real name was Grace, and she was 23 years old. But here's the part that broke my heart all over again. Grace had been trafficked from a village in Edo State when she was 19. She'd been promised a job at a hotel in Lagos. Instead, she was locked in a house with 15 other young women and forced to run romance scams 12 hours a day. If they didn't meet their quotas, they were beaten. If they tried to escape, they were threatened with juju, with curses on their families. Grace wasn't the villain. She was another victim. The real villains were the men running the operation, the ones who'd gotten rich off the desperation of both the scammers and the scammed. They were arrested too, though I suspect some of them bought their way out of jail. That's how it works in Nigeria. Money talks. My father never got his 12,000 euros back. The money was gone, lost in a maze of untraceable accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. But he did get something else. Closure. Not just for himself, but for the hundreds of other people who'd been scammed by this operation. And he got the knowledge that by telling his story, by refusing to be ashamed, he'd helped dismantle a network that had destroyed lives. The story doesn't end there, though. After Yinka's video went viral, I started getting messages. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Women, mostly black women, telling me their stories. Not just about romance scams, but about all the ways they'd been manipulated, exploited, betrayed by systems and people they should have been able to trust. A Kenyan woman in Canada who'd sent money to a man claiming to be starting a business in Nairobi, only to discover he'd used it to marry someone else. A Zimbabwean woman in the UK who'd been conned by a fake investment scheme that promised to help her bring her children from Harare. A Somali woman in Minneapolis who'd lost her life savings to a fraudulent Islamic charity. Each story was different, but they all had the same core. Women who'd worked hard, who'd sacrificed, who'd trusted, and who'd been punished for that trust. Women who were too ashamed to report what had happened because they blamed themselves. I realized something. My father's story wasn't really about him. It was about all of us. About how we survive in a world that sees our vulnerability as an opportunity. About how we rebuild after betrayal. I started a support group. Just a small thing at first, meeting once a month in Brussels. Women would come and share their stories. We'd cry together. Rage together. Laugh together. And slowly, we'd heal together. One of those women was named Fatima. She was Moroccan, in her 50s, and she'd been scammed by someone pretending to be a UN peacekeeper stationed in Mali. She'd lost 8,000 euros, but worse than that, she'd lost her belief in herself. She kept saying, "How could I be so stupid? How could I not see it?" I told her what my father had learned. It's not about intelligence. It's about humanity. They don't target stupid people. They target kind people. Hopeful people. People who still believe in love and connection despite everything life has thrown at them. That's not a weakness. That's a strength. They just weaponized it. Fatima looked at me with tears in her eyes. So what do we do now? We weaponize it right back. We use our stories to protect others. We refuse to be silent. We build something stronger than what they tried to destroy. That support group grew. Within a year, we had chapters in 5 cities. Within 2 years, we'd helped recover over €100,000 through legal action and by working with law enforcement across borders. But more than the money, we'd created a space where women could speak without shame, where they could reclaim their narratives. My father started coming to the meetings. Not as a speaker, but as a listener. He'd sit quietly in the corner, this tall, dignified man with gray in his beard, and he'd hear these women's stories. Sometimes they'd ask him questions. How did you forgive yourself? How did you trust again? And he'd say, I don't know that I have forgiven myself completely. But I've learned to forgive the part of me that wanted to love. That part wasn't foolish. That part was brave. 3 years have passed since that phone call from Chioma. 3 years since I sat at my father's kitchen table and saw him broken. He's different now. We all are. My father volunteers with Yinka's organization, helping to educate people about online fraud. He gives talks at community centers, churches, anywhere people will listen. He tells his story without shame, and every time he does, someone in the audience comes up to him afterward and whispers, "Thank you. This happened to me too." Chioma went back to school and became a social worker, specializing in financial literacy for immigrants and refugees. She says Dad's experience showed her how much work there is to do, how many people are vulnerable because they don't understand how these systems work. As for me, I'm still running the support group. But I've also expanded my work at the nonprofit. We now have a program specifically for women who've been victims of financial fraud. We help them navigate the legal system, rebuild their credit, and most importantly, rebuild their trust in themselves and others. Last month, we got news that Grace, the young woman who'd been forced to scam my father, had been released from custody. The charges against her were dropped when it became clear she'd been trafficked. She's in a rehabilitation program now, learning skills, trying to build a life. My father asked if he could write to her. I wasn't sure it was a good idea, but he insisted. He wrote, "I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll care. But I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because what happened was okay, but because I understand now that you were trapped too. We were both victims of the same system, just on different sides. I hope you find peace. I hope you find freedom. I hope you find people who see your worth without trying to exploit it." Grace wrote back. A short letter, just a few lines. "I'm sorry. I don't expect you to believe me, but I am. What they made me do, it killed something inside me. Thank you for helping to stop them. Thank you for seeing me as human." That letter is framed in my father's study now, next to a picture of my mother. He says it reminds him that healing isn't linear, that sometimes the people who hurt us are hurting too, and that the only way forward is through compassion, even when it's hard. I think about that a lot. About how easy it would have been to just hate the scammer, to see them as a monster, to demand revenge instead of justice. And don't get me wrong, there were days I wanted revenge. Days I lay awake imagining all the ways I could make them suffer. But here's what I learned from my father, from this whole experience. Revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't fill the hole that betrayal leaves. The only thing that heals is connection. Real connection. The kind where you're seen for who you actually are, not who someone wants you to be. My father started dating last year. A real woman this time, someone he met at a cultural event in Brussels. Her name is Adana, and she's a teacher, a widow like him. They take things slow. They meet in person. They build trust carefully, brick by brick. The first time he introduced us, I watched them together, and I saw something I hadn't seen in my father's eyes in years. Not just happiness, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you survived something terrible and came out the other side still capable of love. Adana pulled me aside at dinner and said, "Your father told me what happened. About the scam. I want you to know I respect him more because of it, not less. It takes courage to love after betrayal. Most people close off completely. I thought about that for days. About how we tell stories about strength and survival. About how we celebrate people who become hard and guarded after trauma, who refuse to let anyone in. But what about people like my father? People who get hurt and still choose to be soft. People who lose everything and still choose to hope. That's a different kind of strength. Maybe a more important kind. The other day, I got an email from a woman in South Africa. She'd seen Yinka's video, and it had saved her. She'd been talking to someone online for 3 months, someone who was starting to ask for money. She'd been about to send it when she saw my father's story and recognized all the same patterns. She blocked the person, reported the profile, and saved herself 10,000 rand. "Tell your father thank you," she wrote. "Tell him his courage gave me courage." I showed my father the email. He read it twice, then looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "This," he said. "This is why we tell our stories. Not for pity. Not for revenge. But so the next person doesn't have to go through it alone." That's what I want people to understand. When these things happen, when we're scammed or exploited or betrayed, the natural instinct is to hide. To pretend it didn't happen. To carry the shame in silence because we think it means something about us. But it doesn't. It means something about the world we live in. A world where loneliness is an epidemic. Where capitalism has turned everything, including love, into a transaction. Where people are so desperate to survive that they'll hurt others to do it. Where technology has made it easier than ever to connect, and easier than ever to deceive. And in that world, the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth. About what happened. About how it felt. About how you survived. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that they're not alone. That they're not stupid. That what happened to them wasn't their fault. That they can survive this. That they can heal. That they can love again. My father taught me that. Not through his engineering skills or his logical mind. But through his willingness to be vulnerable. To admit he'd been hurt. To let us see him broken. And then to slowly, piece by piece, put himself back together. That's the story I want to tell. Not just about the scam, but about what came after. About the support group that became a movement. About the women who found their voices. About the systems we exposed and the lives we saved. About the way pain can be transformed into purpose if you're willing to do the work. My father always says that the best revenge is becoming the person you were meant to be. Not the person trauma tried to make you. Not bitter or closed off or afraid. But open. Hopeful. Still believing that connection is possible, that love is real, that people are fundamentally good even when systems are fundamentally broken. I'm still learning that lesson. Some days are easier than others. Some days I want to tell everyone to trust no one, to keep their hearts locked up safe where no one can reach them. But then I think about Adana's laugh at dinner. About Fatima standing up at a support group meeting and saying, "I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor, and I'm going to help others survive too." About Grace's letter, about second chances, about how healing happens in community, not in isolation. And I remember why we do this work. Why we tell these stories. Why we refuse to let shame win. Because every time someone hears my father's story and recognizes themselves in it, they're one step closer to freedom. Every time someone reaches out for help instead of suffering in silence, we break the power these scammers have. Every time we choose connection over isolation, we win. It's been 3 years, and my father still gets emotional when he talks about what happened. But it's a different kind of emotion now. Not shame. Not regret. Something closer to gratitude. It's strange, he told me last week. I lost 12,000 euros and gained something I didn't know I needed. A community. A purpose. The knowledge that my pain could prevent someone else's pain. I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade what came after it. That's the thing about surviving. It changes you. And you get to choose how. You can let it make you bitter and small. Or you can let it make you bigger, more compassionate, more determined to build a world where this happens less. We're still building that world. The support group, the education programs, the advocacy work. It's slow. Some days it feels impossible. But then I see my father on stage, telling his story to a room full of people. And I see someone in the audience crying, not from pity, but from recognition. From relief that they're not alone. And I think, this is it. This is how we heal. Not by forgetting what happened, but by refusing to let it define us. By taking the worst thing that ever happened and turning it into the reason we fight for others. My father shouted, I fell in love online, but he scammed me out of thousands of euros. But that's not where the story ends. It ends with him standing up. With us standing up together. With all of us refusing to be silent about the ways we've been hurt, because silence protects predators and shame protects systems of exploitation. This is our story. My father's story. My story. The story of every person who's ever been betrayed and chose to trust again anyway. Every person who's ever been knocked down and got back up. Every person who's ever been made to feel small and decided to take up space instead. We're still here. We're still fighting. We're still believing that love is possible, that connection is real, that the world can be better than it is. And that, more than any revenge, more than any money recovered, is how we win.